You're listening to
They're gonna call it a hard foul. They're gonna call it a hard foul.
offering in-depth analysis on all things Boston Celtics with your hosts, Jim and Mike Quigley.
Mike, in-season tournament has got me hooked. I have completely done a 180 on my views on this thing. Very entertaining basketball last night, and the point differential kind of wrinkle sucked me in, I think. And here we are. Welcome everyone to Hard Foul. Coming off the Celtics blowout win against the Chicago Bulls, which clinched their berth into the in-season tournament after, looked like they weren't going to be in after, a disappointing matinee loss over the weekend to the Orlando Magic. Mike, how's things going?
Well, things are fantastic. For the Celtics, it's just such an interesting roller coaster of the last 2 weeks or so of basketball to see where this team is, where they struggle, where they're improving. And so, that's all part of the process of the season. So that's why it's fun. Third quarter at the beginning of the season was really good. I remember there was a Nets game where they came out in that third quarter and just went bananas. Actually, it was a couple of games in that stretch, and then they went through this stretch where the Orlando game was just a nightmare. Milwaukee, some other games. And then last night you saw a terrific third quarter. So there's certainly things that the team has to work on that we can talk about. There's things to be excited about, concerned about. And then as far as the in-season tournament goes.
Yeah, let's go there. Let's stop there. Then we'll get into
Let me
Celtics
start
play.
there by saying that this year was
I think
good.
this is fun. I was out on this,
Yeah.
Mike. I'll let you go. I was out. I was out. I thought the courts were really gimmicky. I do like
I
the
like
Celtics,
the courts.
The Celtics uniform. I thought they did a pretty good job. I thought the Bulls uniform last night was great for the city edition in the tournament. But I thought this was European soccer. I just wasn't into it, but I'm in now. I'm fully bought in, and it took last night. But go ahead.
So I am too. I was a little bit at the beginning and then more and more. And this year was good. I think next year is going to be great now that the teams understand it a little bit more. Mm-hmm. So I was listening to Brian Scalabrine on the radio this morning. The Orlando Magic had a 30-point lead in the fourth quarter against the Nets for their first game of the play-in, and they took out all their starters. And then the Nets outscored them 36-18 in the fourth quarter. And that's the reason they're not going into the next round, despite the fact that they beat the best team in the NBA.
Yeah.
And pretty much dominated them, and they went for it. Orlando went for it in that Friday game, that matinee game in that fourth quarter. They were going for it, but it was too late. So the crowd in Boston last night, they stayed to the very end of this game because they were keeping track of the points. Mazzulla was, intentionally following Andre Drummond up 30. And initially I was angry, but then I saw his little discussion with Billy Donovan, and even Billy Donovan shook his head at midcourt, yeah, you're trying to get into the next round. You're keeping points right now. You saw pressure on Sam Hauser and Luke Cornett and Peyton Pritchard in the last 2 minutes of that game to increase the lead because those guys have $500,000 on the line. And the assistant coaches were super into the game last night because they have $500,000 on the line. And I love it. In this game in Indiana, think about it. When's the last time that team in that city had a meaningful playoff game? That place is going to be nuts.
Yeah,
that crowd's going to be so into it. And I expect a high scoring game, and I expect Tyler Halliburton to show up. Miles Turner is going to show up. It's going to be a really good game Monday night.
Yeah, I still don't have faith in Miles Turner, but I know where you're going with that. They're a good basketball.
Oh, he scored 50 against the Celtics last year.
They're good. Yeah, he had that one time. They also used to cover him with Peyton Pritchard for a reason. they're a really good offensive team. But before I even get to Indiana, look, I don't think I would have been into this. I really don't if the Celtics had beat Orlando. And they were 3-0 and they're going into this hapless Chicago game. I would have, but the fact that they lost and they had to reach a certain point differential made last night interesting. It made it interesting. And then I really started thinking about it afterwards. You know, Indiana, you're right, that's going to be fun. But what will be really fun is if they play in Milwaukee a Thursday night from now, a week from Thursday down in Vegas. And adding more edge to that rivalry and what that Eastern Conference final potential matchup could look like. It'll be matched up against the Patriots and the Steelers, so it'll be interesting to see how like the ratings between the two, games kind of line up. I think then you potentially see a Lakers Celtics finals. Maybe you could see, and then they play a week later on Christmas. That will just add more juice to that. And you look at the level of teams that are in it. Because let's be honest, you and I will still watch if Indiana and the Knicks advance, and it's like Sacramento advancing out west. But at the same time, it's just not that interesting overall, I think, to the average fan if that happens, and rightfully so. But you have some marquee teams right now that can potentially continue to go on, play in Vegas, and I just think it becomes a little bit more fun. I think you're right with the added incentive of $500,000 for all players and coaches. It's going to give your star players a reason to play for their teammates and build that camaraderie even more. It really it's going to give an edge. It's going to give an edge, and I do think it will be a playoff intensity. Maybe starting in Indiana. I think the crowd will certainly be in it, but definitely in Vegas, especially if you see these marquee matchups. And it will spur more of a rivalry. It might spur some bad blood, which isn't the worst thing in the world, too. You might, when you're playing for something, more of an edge comes out. And, if you get some bad blood between Milwaukee and Boston, I think that's good. I think that's good for the game. I think it's good for the league. If you get some bad blood between Phoenix and LA on Wednesday night or Tuesday night, whenever they play, that's a good thing.
Durant and LeBron. Yeah.
So I was not into this. I still think the courts look stupid for the most part. I love the parquet floor. I don't know why they had to change that up. But I understand it's like a branding thing, especially early on. But yeah, I am hooked in, and what else are you gonna do in December right now? The Patriots suck. And this
so
for the league is a good thing for the Celtics, I think, ultimately.
I want to touch on how this
it's better that they're going
Celtics.
on the road to play in Indiana. To me, right now, I think they have some work to do on the road, and so I like facing a little bit of adversity for a team built like Boston. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I think that this can help the Celtics as they prepare for a playoff run. I do think Indiana is going to be treating this like their championship, and I think the crowd is too. And so for guys like Peyton Pritchard, for guys like Sam Hauser and Luke Cornett, who may have to play minutes at some point on the road in the playoffs, say Kristaps Porzingis is hurt and can't play a game, for example.
Yeah.
Or Banton. Banton's been getting some minutes now. This is really good experience for them. This tournament, to me, to see a guy like Sam Hauser get those minutes that he didn't get last year very much of. That they're going to depend on him this year. So I'm excited for that. And
Hauser.
To see LeBron and Kevin Durant play in a tournament like this, I mean, that's at the end of their careers. I think that's pretty cool. I could see them wanting to add this to their repertoire. This is one other thing I want. LeBron, definitely, he is such a sociopath that he wants to be the first one to win this tournament. I can guarantee you that. This means a lot to him, right? We're talking LeBron James, if we're talking about him, every little thing matters to him. I expect that game to be a war. That's going to be a great game on Tuesday night.
Yeah, no, it really should. It really should. I mean, the Celtics-Indiana matchup, it's interesting because Indiana's built for the regular season, right? The way they play offense.
Of course.
They're constantly moving. And when teams aren't really scouting and preparing for you, you can really take advantage of that, especially when you have a really good player like Halliburton, a rising star, potentially an all NBA guy this year. I think he probably will be. What usually happens to teams like that is, especially early on in the playoffs, you team scout against you, it gets a little harder to score. And Indiana doesn't play any defense as up to this point in the season, and so how are they going to react with the home crowd behind them? So can the Celtics take the energy out of the building early by playing, taking them out of some action, or if the Celtics don't come with that intensity that you would expect, Indiana makes a few shots and the crowd gets into it, and it certainly could be fun. Mike, let's get off the in-season tournament just for a minute. We can certainly go back to it as we proceed, but let's talk about the Celtics. I'm going to start with the encouraging. At least for me, I think a hallmark of a championship team, of a really good team, is how they play at home, especially if you want to look for something during the regular season. And the Celtics over the past few years, it's been good. It hasn't been great, especially early in the season, the past few seasons. And I think you've seen that caught up to them in the playoffs, where they have not protected their home court and at all. And so what I'm looking at encouraging right now is that they're dominating at home, and they're beating the good teams in close games at home, and then they're dominating the bad. Seems to be, whether they would acknowledge it or not, there seems to be an emphasis this year for this team that they are not going to get beat there, and there isn't going to be the Nets meltdown when they're up 30 and they lose by 8 or whatever. There seems to be a pretty good focus when they're playing on their home court. I think, and they've had more road games, I believe, than home games so far this year. But whatever they are, 6-0, 7-0, and then after this in-season tournament, they get a good stretch. Starting Friday night, they get Philly, they get a couple games against Cleveland and a couple games against Orlando. So we'll see if this continues as they face pretty good teams. But they've been excellent at home, and that's my good to start off. I think it's a really important sign. I think it's a really good sign. And go wherever you want with that, Mike, or talk about something else.
I certainly agree with that. I mean, the 2008 championship team, if we go back to the last team that won the NBA Finals, it was like you knew when you were coming to Boston that you weren't going to win. And that was like a hallmark trait of that team.
Yeah, look at
they didn't lose.
Celtics, at home too.
Yeah.
I think they lost.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't lose a home. They lost one home postseason game on their run to the Detroit Pistons, and that was it, that 08 team. That was like a shot to the gut because it just wasn't expected to happen. And luckily, of course, they went on the road to take that series. But I agree. Like that is really great to see. One thing, I think their next step is finishing off these teams at home a little bit better. Like, don't give them any hope. Just like crush them. And then on the road, so their challenge for this team, something that they need to improve upon, is they have leads on the road, oftentimes big leads, and they blow them pretty quickly. And so what is happening?
Bad teams, especially against bad teams.
But
like
it happened against a really good team in Orlando, right?
Yeah.
So so like what is the mentality? What needs to change there? And I'm interested to see, they played really well without Kristaps Porzingis, but I'm interested to see how.
Not in Orlando, they didn't.
Not in Orlando. But I'm interested to see the impact of that because Al's playing a lot of minutes right now, and he's playing really well. How's Missoula going to address that? Because first test is Friday night, Philadelphia at home. That's a big test without KP. Sure. And you don't have Grant Williams. You don't have Rob Williams to step in and assist anymore with Embiid. Al's kind of on an island here. Yeah, Al's really on an island, and that to me feels like a game that the Celtics could lose at home just because they're really outmatched at that position going into Friday night. So one of the concerns I want to address is KP's injury and the need for him for them to win a championship. They need him just because they don't have the depth at that position, and Al's just too seasoned in his career to depend on him, as we saw in the postseason last year. Well, I'm older than Al Horford, so I can't call him old.
Well, he's old for the NBA. I'm older than both. He's old for the NBA. Yeah, sure. And like on this injury itself, it doesn't sound like it's too serious. I know Porzingis was on the telecast last night in the first half. They had him on, I think, in the second quarter, and he said he anticipates being back either Friday night or definitely the following week. So I wouldn't rush him at all. Anything lower half of the body, you take as much time as you want this time of year. Calf strains can turn into, serious strains pretty quickly if you don't treat him right. So if he's not 100% Friday night, I certainly wouldn't play him. I think it would be a tough game, but he's not a great matchup for Porzingis either. They used him in different ways to kind of help on him. He's not a great matchup for Embiid either. I'm sorry, I said not a great matchup for Porzingis. He's not a great matchup. Porzingis is not a great matchup for Embiid either, and I know they used him as help in the last game, and he was matched up on him sometimes. But they're going to have to get creative every time they play him with doubles and triple teams and things like that. And where they had trouble, I thought, in the last couple of games is they were out of position often when they went to double and gave Embiid really good passing lanes, and for Philly to attack that. So they need to clean up their rotations and their scrambling on defense when they face Embiid, because it's not going to be easy. You'll see Holiday start there with him, and then off switches to see what they can get matchups. But yeah, Embiid is playing at a different level, and even against Al now, when he catches that ball at the foul line, it's become a layup for him, and not even Al can defend that. He's just not big enough to get a hand up on him. So he just presents all sorts of matchups. I think the best thing the Celtics can do is rebound the basketball on the defensive side against the Sixers and run every chance you get. You got to run him the same strategy as you've been seeing for the Embiid's entire career, and hoping that you got a guy tugging at his shorts in the fourth quarter rather than dictating the game, as we've seen him do from time to time. The Celtics, I'll say this, no matter what the Celtics have gone into a game against Embiid, they've typically been pretty steady. Embiid's numbers against the Celtics are probably as worse against any team in the league. And they seem to know how to attack that. I just think the difference this year with the Sixers is in Embiid. It isn't Embiid at a different level or anything else. But even though you could probably make an argument he's a little better, it's that I think his number two is better than he's ever had. I think Maxey is better than Simmons at any point in Simmons' career there as far as a fit with Embiid, and certainly he's better than Harden. And I the only one you could argue that might have been at another level was Jimmy Butler. And so you see a guy in Maxey right now that can impact the game on the offensive end, unlike anyone they've had there in quite a while, or if at all. And the best way for the Celtics to attack that is what they did the second time they played the Sixers, was to put Maxey in as much action on the defensive end as possible. They just kept finding him and attacking him all game long, and because he's just not built for that yet. And I think that's what you got to continue to do. So, hey, Friday night Sixers. This is a really good team. But Celtics, even shorthanded at home, I'd expect them to be favorites, and I expect them to win.
I also expect that you'll see some possessions where Drew Holiday is covering Joel Embiid.
Sure, they did that the first
which is
game,
just which is just crazy that guy's such a unique player that he can do things like that.
Well, they used to do that with Smart quite a bit too, and Smart's
I know, and it's great. I don't have any more like Celtic points to really go over.
Well,
I
I just
think
have
the
one other
biggest.
thing that was concerning to me on
Oh,
the Celtics.
I was gonna say something.
Yeah,
Just that for me, it's I want them to overcome this is going on for years now. 3 different coaches. This lack of focus, this lack of intensity, and this inability to stop runs
yeah,
that just get out of control way too fast. That 17-0 run against Orlando, and then he followed that up in the fourth quarter with a 12-0 run. So 29-0.
yeah.
If you
Combine the two, yeah.
and I know there's other third quarters that I'm just missing right now. But like that one obviously really stands out. And if you think back to last year, they blew that 28-point lead against the Nets. They gave up like that 30-point second half to Miles Turner on the road.
Mhm.
And it was just these like bad losses. And it did translate into the playoffs where it hurt them. The third quarter against Miami, the second quarter against Miami, end of game situations, blowing the lead against the Atlanta Hawks, where that series got extended when it didn't have to. So it's like this immaturity where Tatum and Brown and Porzingis is part of it now. They need to really, really step up and do better, or they're not going to win a championship.
Yeah, no, it needs to be better. Like I find it to be a huge concern, and I don't love the fact that the coach doesn't seem to really change anything when these things are happening. You know, we let a 17-0 run go pretty much without a timeout or any real substitutions. You know, sometimes it's just a matter of, you know, going to the bench and trying to get a spark to lift your team up. Doesn't always work. Timeouts don't always work. But I think you need to do something, and certainly Tatum, it's kind of the next step, you know, is for him, you know, to kind of step up and get this team out of this funk, you know, and to hit a big basket, to make sure your team gets a good look. And I find like it's, you know, the troubling thing to me, and what I was going to bring up, Mike, is that when these runs start, it's oftentimes kind of they've had the start of the team going on the run. The Celtics offense, the looks they get are usually pretty good, and it just misses, and they let that kind of spiral. Instead of just continue to run the offense, we just got good looks. Let's continue to run it how we get, because this is the NBA. Eventually, those are going to fall. If we defensive rebound, and we continue to, you know, move the ball, get Porzingis in action, or whatever they're doing to get those good looks. You continue that repetition. Maybe those 17-0 runs are just an 8-0 run, or it's a 10-2 run. And those runs happen all the time in the NBA, right? Those are common runs. 17-0 is unacceptable. Losing a 16-point lead in Philadelphia in the blink of an eye, you can't do that. Those are things that, as a good team, they need to be mature enough to not let it kind of unravel them. And I think that was particularly true in Orlando in that first run in that third quarter. The looks they were getting were good. They just missed them, and then they went away from it. And then all of a sudden, they're not defensive rebounding. And then all of a sudden, they're giving up, you know, fast break looks to Orlando. And it just kind of spiraled. And maybe that's where the coach needs to call a timeout when it's 6-0 or 8-0, and he sees that one possession where they go down for an ISO 3 and say, hey, get back to how we were playing, because, you know, even though we're not making them, they're good shots and they're eventually going to fall. And the Celtics seem to just kind of, you know, they've been doing this for too long to be immature in those situations. And so they need to grow up. And hopefully they will.
Yeah,
soon, you know,
they have to, or they're not gonna. I mean, they can't play that way. It's a lack of focus. It's a lack of maturity. They need to figure it out. I mean, even in Toronto, the second game against Toronto, they had a huge lead and they blew a 16-point lead in the third quarter in like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And then that game went down to the wire.
Memphis as well.
Yeah, Memphis too.
Yeah.
The Hornets as well. and then you lost that game. I mean, talk about things we've seen in the past that's so concerning with this team is you didn't score for the last 2 minutes of regulation against Memphis. I mean, against the Charlotte Hornets, and you gave up that lead. They went on a 9-0 run, and then it was over.
Yeah,
and it was a lot of being out. Yeah, it was a lot of just being outworked by Mark Williams, the center.
That was.
I mean, ball was hot, but you were just being outworked.
And that one, I mean, to be fair, was a little fluky too. I mean, they missed 2 layups down the final 2 minutes. They missed
free throws,
and so that.
But we've seen this.
Yeah, you've seen it.
How many times have we seen it? Yeah,
you've seen it.
So I do have to get off pretty soon, Jim. My last thing I just wanted to share just about the NBA as a whole is that the Houston Rockets and Ime playing defense. It just shows like how good of a coach that guy is to see the improvement already at the beginning of the season. And that team that had zero interest in doing anything last year was surprising to me to see where they're at. And then what's going to happen with OKC? OKC has been one of the best teams to watch. I think SGA is an MVP candidate. In this story with Josh Giddey, to see where that goes, I don't want to get into it. I just want to say, like, if it's true and he's in trouble, talk about a superstar in the making that they could not have, like, possibly not have in their team anymore. I'd be interested to see what happens with that situation.
Well, I think, you bring up 2 guys, different situations, but Ime obviously had his problems. Giddey, his situation now, you had Miles Bridges, you had Kevin Porter, all different scenarios. I know, different. But the league really, they better be careful right now. They have too many guys out there that are in the spotlight that have bad history that involve women. And, and so, it's kind of, I know you didn't do it on purpose, Ime Giddey, this way, but it and I don't know exactly how you handle it. I always go back to, I think teams deserve penalties. When you bring in a guy like Ime, you bring in a guy like Miles Bridges, if you sign him going forward to your team and he does it again, maybe you got to be docked to pick. Maybe you got to lose a 2nd round pick here. It's something so that it's not just the person that commits the foul receives a penalty, that the team feels some pain too. And as far as Josh Giddey goes, the accusations to me are pretty serious, based on the
very.
And I think the NBA, they have a lot of guys they can market. It seems like a lot of good guys in the league, but this relationship between these men and the behavior towards women, I think is a real problem. Major League Baseball had this problem a few years ago, and they stiffened their penalties, and I think it served the sport well. And I think maybe the NBA has to kind of look at something like that soon.
Yeah, and it's just like so awkward to see these interviews with Giddey, and then with OKC staff, it's just they're all kind of like tiptoeing around it.
Sure.
It better not be true if you're OKC, because it's bad, man. It is really it's a bad situation. Like, I think it would be best that he not play right now. That's how I feel. I just think it would be best that he not play.
Yeah, where he has not been charged with anything. You get into I don't know how they can do that with the union.
And where the union steps in. I get it. I'm just saying, just overall.
Yeah.
If I was in charge of everything and I had a magic wand, it would be you're not playing until this is figured out.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's clearly not good, and I think it's an issue that the league really needs to take a deeper look into, and how they handle it.
Yeah, maybe I'm an idiot, Jim. I've never really understood what happened with Ime. Like, I never got the full story, or maybe I wasn't paying attention enough. Like, I felt like I never got the details. But yeah, if he did something awful too, then I'm sorry for not bringing that up. I was just bringing up the basketball and the coaching in Houston, but I've never really understood exactly what happened. But yeah, I just want to put that out there.
I think it was he had a relationship with a woman in the workplace who was married, and she definitely has some responsibilities in this too. She's an adult, from what I understand. And it sounds like, from what you read too, that he tried to continue things when he was told not to. So again, I don't.
Okay.
It's not on the same par, but it's clearly, it's not something you want. He needs to be held to account at a higher level than players are.
This can't happen.
Anyone that's in management, So
that's right. Yeah.
So, all right.
All right. Well,
so we'll talk soon.
Got real serious on the
off
pod.
that stuff. The in-season tournament's friggin' awesome. I hated it.
It is.
Now I'm all in, and I want to see the Bucks. I know you're excited about the Pacers, but I want to see the Bucks Celtics next Thursday night. I think that would be really, really cool. I'll be thoroughly disappointed if we don't. So that's my 2 cents. And for everyone else,
and then Lakers, Celtics in Vegas, couple Saturdays from now. All right,
it'll be a road game. It'll be a road game, which will be cool. All right.
Yeah.
I'll talk to everyone soon.
Later.